Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Steel City Underground WTF podcast. My name is Terry Fletcher. Week 12 in the NFL was definitely interesting. You probably noticed that week 11, I skipped a little bit, mostly because I was traveling, so I apologize for those of you that listen every week. So I kind of wanted to recap what happened, and we know that Thursday night game was ugly. Everybody's talked about it, probably like beating a dead horse. But one of the things that came out, and we found out about it in the beginning of week 12, were the fines and final fallout from that game. So Mason Rudolph, I guess for quote unquote starting it, got a $50,000 fine. There was over $1 million total fines, including game checks from suspensions. Pouncey ended up from 3 games, went down to 2 games. And you know why they did that. It's because they don't want Pouncey playing at Browns next week. And so that did not surprise me at all. I actually called it that he would get 2 games. He probably would have gotten 1 if he just threw a punch, but when you kick somebody, or at least go to kick, if you look at the tape, he actually missed when he kicked. But you're going to get at least 2 games. Myles Garrett's suspension of indefinitely was held up for the season, so he's out the rest of the 6 games and the playoffs. And then, of course, he comes out with a racial slur comment, basically saying that that's what started it. He said something about it in his discussion or hearing about his appeal. And, you just know the climate in today's society. And if there's anything racially charged that's said or done or anything, everybody is so quick to point it out. It's not where you wait to say it. So that really lost Garrett some credibility with everybody as far as coming out and saying that. Well, I should say with most people, because right after it happened and, NFL was very quick to say, you're out of here, buddy, for the rest of the season. We don't need that in this league. He basically apologized to Mason. He apologized to the Browns. He apologized to the fans and said his actions were wrong. And so you kind of look at it like, okay, as much as I think you're a jerk for what you did, at least you can cut him some slack, until he said that. And so it really bothered me. But I think the biggest thing that just really shows bad taste, and let's face it, we've had to deal with the Cincinnati Burficts over the years and just that nonsense and the headhunting and everything. But then you went and you looked at the next game where the Browns basically on their tailgating before their next game, they had Rudolph Pinatas at the tailgating. And so there's kids around there, people. WTF, what the football are you doing? You don't sit there and show that that's okay. Anybody remember, Kathy Griffith, what she did? You just don't do that. So that I'm going to be very hot about that. That's just a ridiculous lack of sportsmanship, lack of class to put that out there. And then, the guy got a $50,000 fine, and we'll talk about what's going to happen to him moving forward. But it was just not good. I just really was disappointed in week 11. And so the WTFs were everywhere. So what did we have basically versus Cincinnati? Well, they started Rudolph, obviously. He had a lot of bad throws, but in looking at that game, and I've rewatched it 4 times now, only because it was hard to watch, and I had to restart and stop it again and start it again, saying, did he really do that? I think in addition to the bad throws, he just made some bad decisions. And so it was not good. And so they put in Devin Hodges in the second half. And right off the bat, his second pass was a 90-yard touchdown. We pulled ahead. When I say we, I mean the Steelers. And then one of the things that I thought was interesting is that we had there was 5 minutes and 11 seconds left to go. And there was in the second drive, and the Bengals had only 11 seconds on the field. And in 4 drives, they basically, or I should say 4 attempts, they did all passes, and 2 were broken up by Hayden. And so they didn't even try to run the ball, but 11 seconds took the 3 and out for them. We got Benny Snell back, spark plug. I really like this guy. I wish somebody would have told us in fantasy. Yeah, how many of you started Samuels? You saw that James Conner was out again, and you're like, oh, great, pick up Samuels. This is a great pickup. And he got his 4 points. Yeah, that did not help anybody. If you ever get a chance to watch that ESPN segment on fantasy where they talk about, this guy scores or this guy's put in, they say, first time in the NFL and he gets a 30-yard pass completion, or he makes a touchdown, first touchdown in the NFL. And, we're week 11 and 12 into our fantasy football, which, some of us have money riding on it. And you just want to yell at the TV and you want to yell at everything going, that helps nobody. And that's actually a segment on ESPN on Mondays. So kind of funny to me. And then the one thing that you just want to really kind of embrace if you can, and this is, for me, this is a WTF moment in the positive for Mike Tomlin. He is definitely pulling his hair out this season. I mean, he fielded a team Sunday, think about this, that ended up with the second most rush yards. This is before Monday Night Football. Second most receiving yards from players plucked off somebody else's practice squad. When we get some of those other kids. The quarterback was at a D3 school, and his call to fame was winning state duck call championship last year. Deion Kane, that was the Colts practice squad. He was definitely effective, or I should say impactful, in the game. And, it was the Bengals. I understand that. I do understand that. But it's not easy winning in the NFL. So kudos to Mike Tomlin to just sit there and say, wow. Now, in saying that, everybody should know that even though we won 16-10 and Mason played terrible, he started. So he gets the win. Remember back in the day where there was when we had Landry Jones and he had started a game, and I think it was only the second or third play, one of his offensive line players stepped on his foot. And so he went out. Ben was actually the backup that day, and he was coming off an injury. And he went in and won the game for him. And he even told Landry, he's like, yeah, you started, you win it. So you just have to just keep those things in perspective. But also think about this too. And, outside of the James Washington touchdown, which was made by the stiff arm, Duck was 4 for 10 for 39 yards compared to Rudolph's 8 for 16 for 85 yards. I'm not saying that it didn't look better because we got a score out of it, but this was really the equivalent of a mid-game goalie change to breathe some new life into the team. Really nothing more. I mean, Duck's fun, nice kid, but everyone just calm down a little bit. We don't know what's going to happen as far as, will we get to postseason? I'm hoping that we just don't have a losing record. And then I'd like to look and see if we can pull a wild card spot. Because with how teams are playing, and I am not a Ravens fan, even though they do show the Steelers more respect than either Cincy or the Browns have in the last couple of years. They're playing lights out, and you just know that something there is definitely going to happen. I mean, they beat the Patriots, and nobody seems to have an answer for their quarterback. And so what's interesting, though, is that when we played them, if we didn't fumble, we would have beat them. We actually did have an answer. So I don't think people really understand that when they think about the Steelers, if you go back and look at that game against them. But the one thing that was really funny, and this is a total WTF moment in that Cincinnati game, did you check out the little news piece they did in the middle about that Cincinnati fan living on his roof of his restaurant that he owns until they win? He has a porta potty up there and everything, and it's freezing in Cincinnati. So he's like, yeah, I'm just a little bored. His wife brings him food. Maybe she likes him up there. I'm not sure. But he basically is like, I'm staying on the roof until they win. Well, dude, guess what? They're not winning yet. So sitting there at 0-11, that's really sad for me. But think about this for the Steelers. They lost Coach Munchak to Denver. Coach Drake passed away suddenly at camp. We ditched our leading receiver from last year. Hall of Fame quarterback is on IR. We started 0-3. Does anybody remember that? Our Pro Bowl running back is hurt most of the season, and now I'm thinking that he's a little bit injury prone. And we are now currently 6th seed in the playoffs. We have a wild card spot because the Raiders lost. So that's really remarkable. And if you want to think of any WTF moment, that would be it, where the Steelers are right now. Don't know how far it's going to take us, but that's where we are. So let's look around the league at other games that had some moments or head-scratching WTF moments. Week 12. So the San Francisco 49ers, they gave a beatdown to the Packers, 37-8 in a Sunday night football game. And it was just a butt kicking. It really showed the weaknesses with Aaron Rodgers and keeping him to 100 yards passing. I mean, who does that? So I guess they're the real deal. I have a friend in my office who is a 49ers fan, and he's just like, can you believe how well we're doing? So that was pretty crazy. When the Steeler game was over, they went to the New Orleans Panthers game, and it was tied 31-31. I was like, okay, well, obviously no defense showed up. But what was sad is that the Panthers field goal guy, the kicker, he missed it. And so then, of course, they give it back to Breeze, and you can never give Breeze back the ball, especially with a couple minutes left. That's like giving Tom Brady back the ball. It's like giving Big Ben back the ball. That's like giving anybody who is a seasoned quarterback and knows how to get down the field the ball back. And New Orleans ended up winning 34-31. So you just can't give anyone another shot. It's just not going to work out for you. The Titans beat down the Jags 42-20. And everybody thought, when Nick Foles came back, and he's had some great numbers, that they'd start winning games without having Minshew in there. But I'm telling you, he doesn't have a good offensive line, and the defense is just not stepping up. So they got rid of their one player, sent him over to L.A., and now the Jags are definitely pedestrian again. So that was kind of interesting. But did you see the news piece? So here is a fun WTF moment with the Redskins. So they win over the Lions, and they're also dealing with a backup quarterback on the Lions, and the Redskins are dealing with their rookie. But they win 19-16. And their quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, thought Sunday's game against the Detroit Lions was over. He runs over to the sideline, takes a selfie with the fan, and because cornerback Fabian Moreau had just caught the interception in the final seconds of the game, and everybody was going wild with the Redskins win. They're just like, it was their first home win of the season, so I get the WTF moment. But unfortunately for Haskins, he needed to be on the field to take a knee and run out the clock. Instead, they couldn't find him, and so Case Keenum had to go and take the field to basically take the knee to end the game. So, dude, WTF, oops, you need to know what's going on the field and wait for those selfies till after the game. But that was truly comical to me. And then the Pats game tripping call. I don't know if you noticed it. Now, obviously, if you're listening to this and you're a Steelers fan, we all have our issues with the Patriots. We're not happy that they're 10-1. They keep winning, and people keep whining about how bad they're playing, but of course they keep winning. But they beat the Cowboys in Foxborough, and the weather was terrible. They had freezing rain, sleeting. But there were some penalties in the game that were weird. There was 2 tripping calls that the NFL actually came out on Monday after reviewing the 2 penalties, and they told the Cowboys that they should have not been called. So what do you do with that? They just basically say, I'm sorry. Hopefully those referees get penalized. But then there was another issue where the ball was in the air at the very end, and for some reason, while the ball's in the air, the clock stopped. So there was still 1 second on the clock. Even Tom Brady mentioned it, and he usually doesn't speak out against the refs, but he did. I would have too. I don't know if he'll get fined for that, but it was just weird because they're at their own field. So who's running the clock? Is it the Patriots running the clock? Is it the refs running the clock? But there was still 1 second, which gave the team the ball back. That was weird. He said usually that just runs out. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. So definitely a WTF moment in that area. But in talking about penalties, and I know I keep every so often in our weekly podcast, I keep bringing up pass interference. But here's something I was thinking about. So when we don't get the calls, that's first of all a problem. But when the calls are clearly a mistake or not called and they're challenged, and you don't get the turnover call, or you don't get the overturn, I should say, and it's not called by New York. So, Al Riveron's in there, and you're just like, what are you doing in there that you don't understand that this is clearly pass interference? And I realize it's subjective and a judgment call, but the problem is that he's placing his judgment on something that will also affect the refs moving forward, because now it gives them a precedence of, oh, well, if they didn't overturn this, then next time I see that, that's not pass interference. And is that what they want? they're not giving them a standard or giving them a bad standard of what pass interference is. So I hope that they understand what they're doing here. And this is the only year that we're going to have pass interference as a reviewable play, and they're done with it, because this has just been a nightmare when it comes to trying to get those overturned, especially when they're clearly wrong and when they call it. So the Ravens at Rams, that was an ugly game. Lamar Jackson, his 5 touchdown passes, plus almost 100 yards rushing, beat down of 42-6. The Rams just looked terrible. And they even put in RG3, who had a great long pass to get in a rushing touchdown in there. But Aaron Donald, I was watching what they did to him. Now, remember, he was voted the number 1 player in the league by his peers this year. And he was held to no sacks, no tackles, no fantasy points, no nothing. And it was because they double teamed him every time. To me, that's brilliant. Everybody's talking about the Ravens offense, which is one of the highest scoring offense in the league. But think about their defense right now. I was actually surprised at how well that worked. And the biggest problem in that game, I had Mark Ingram as my fantasy running back. I was able to trade for him last minute before the deadline. I only needed 1.9 points to win my fantasy this week. And they pulled the starters at 40 points. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I mean, pull Jackson. I get that. But make Marco in and score another touchdown. He only had 2. I needed 1 more. So, yeah, it felt like week 17. But what are you going to do? So, yeah, that wasn't a good one. So looking ahead to week 13 and a couple of the WTFs that I heard on the way into work today. First of all was on the LA Chargers. I still can't say LA, but I want to say San Diego every time. They were on a bye this week, but the coach came out and said something interesting. I mean, it was his words. He was in an interview. He called out Phillip Rivers. He said, 7 picks in the last 2 games consecutively. He goes, and they said, are you putting him on notice? He said, I'm saying that we're going to put people on the field that give us the best chance to win. And right now I'm not positive that it's our starting quarterback. So when you hear that from a coach for a veteran player, that's pretty awful. So just be aware that keep an eye on that one as well. I mean, we already have Eli on the bench. So you have people on the bench right now that you've got in Cincinnati, you have, I always forget his name, but he's on the bench. And then now you're looking at possibly getting Phillip Rivers on the bench. And so this is Andy Dalton. I knew it would come to me, but some veteran quarterbacks are seeing some wood. And I mean, I just keep thinking with how our defense is playing this year, how Pittsburgh's defense is playing. How awesome would it be if Ben wasn't on IR? I think we would absolutely have a better chance than we have. So looking ahead, would I start Hodges at quarterback? I would absolutely start him, not because he saved the day. That was the Steelers' defense, let's face it, but because I want to see what he does after a week of practice. And I want to keep Rudolph out of the Browns game and the unavoidable drama and targeting, and they've seen how he plays. So they're already going to plan for him. You don't really know what Duck can do. So, in Tomlin's presser on Tuesday, he said that on the Stanford grad, undrafted rookie, and duck calling champion, Devlin Hodges, he said he will start on Sunday. And somebody said, what's your expectation? And I'll quote, he said, I expect him not to kill us. Wow. Okay. I wonder what Mason Rudolph thought about that quote. Apparently, that's why you're sat this week. So I believe that it is definitely the right call. I'm surprised that he did this, but we've had 3 starting quarterbacks now in several games this season, and we are still in the playoff hunt. So the fact, if we can end the season with a winning record and at least get to a wild card game, sometimes pure adrenaline, the defense, and next man up, sometimes it actually does it for you. So that's what we're looking at this week. I can't wait to see what the Browns brings us on December 1st. And remember, we are at home. So talk about a different climate. And hopefully our fans keep it classy. Don't go down to their level with the whole pinata thing. And let's hope we don't see any of those T-shirts out there that say Pittsburgh started it. I know those sold out in Ohio. So hopefully it'll be all right. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. And this is the Steel City Underground podcast, WTF week. And I'll talk to you next week.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.